I'd say that I would miss takeaways, like, just being able to.
What? I didn't even think about it, but girl, you're right.
Do you know what I mean?
Days.
Like
yes,
Uber Eats and stuff, Deliveroo, just being able to say, today I feel like I want to have
variety.
Right?
Yo, that is it.
Right? Because I'm gonna come from my mum here a little bit. When I was in Sierra Leone, she was like, the food is amazing, and the food is amazing. I won't lie. I ordered Chinese. Why did the Chinese fried rice taste like African stew? I was vexed. And she probably bigged it up to me like, yeah, it's going to be just the same. It wasn't just the same. It was not just the same. And I was so annoyed. And my sister came with me. My sister's half Caribbean. And she got macaroni and cheese, right? And she was like, this is the spiciest macaroni and cheese. Welcome to Ethically Speaking. I'm your host Monah, and today I am joined by Nushy Rose and Sophie Hannah. Today we'll be talking about reverse migration, and my question today is, would you ever reverse migrate and move back to the country that your parents or grandparents call home?
No. It's a quick no for me. I have to say, and I think this is kind of taboo, and I feel like I'm stepping out there online to say that I am fine with being British for the most part. And I feel like that is really taboo to say these days. And I think it's a very loaded comment for people who come from like a Caribbean background or an African background, because there seems to be a greater push to, we're not from here, we're not British, we are linked to other countries, other continents. And I believe that. I see myself as Black British Caribbean, but also I'm not in a rush to kind of go back to a country which isn't my birth country, which wouldn't accept me, which don't see me as one of their country fellow men. So no, reverse migration isn't for me.
Yeah, I actually would 100% reverse migrate, but not because I feel that Sri Lanka would be my spiritual home or anything like that. I'm with you. Like, I feel very British, like I've been conditioned. My lived experience is
this is it.
In Britain.
This is it.
Like, if I'm uncomfortable here, it doesn't mean that I belong somewhere else. It means that in my view, I should probably think about, okay, what is it about this place, rather than thinking, okay, I fit into a country I've never lived in. But the reasons I would go back, or not even go back, the reasons I would reverse migrate is that, first of all, the opportunities are amazing if you are from the diaspora, which I think is problematic in itself. But
what are some of the benefits that they have for people that want to go back?
So the benefits, if you do go back, are, first of all, a lot of multinational corporations will hire you and put you into more senior roles. So the advantage you have if you go back is almost kind of at the disadvantage of the local population. So I can see, if I was purely driven by wealth, if I was starting like a business or something, I would do that. And I think the kind of assumption you have to make is that nowhere's a level playing field. So if you feel really disadvantaged here and you feel you can be advantaged elsewhere, that you have some connection to, I can understand why some people would. And if I was starting a business, maybe it's something I would consider.
It's a funny one, because a couple of months ago I was in a bit of a funny headspace, and all I kept saying to myself is that I just wanted to be around people who looked like me.
Yeah.
And I wanted my look to be the norm. And I'm not joking, it got really deep. I didn't want to speak English anymore. So when I was at home, I constantly spoke in my mother tongue. And when I came out, I kind of felt like a resentment that I had to change that. So I was in this frame of mind where I thought, I don't want to be in a society where I am othered. And I know that in some way we're all othered in some certain aspect, but my skin colour being that and the way that I look is a very, very big thing for me. And I just felt like, no, right now I can't be dealing with this. And I don't know why that was. And I'm somewhat still in that mind frame. So to answer the question, I would say yes, but I'm not too sure if that's influenced because of the frame of mind that I was in. Because when I think about living there, comfortability, what I'm used to, it would definitely be a big shock. So there's a multitude of things that have to be taken into consideration when answering that question.
And I think people just need to be really honest with themselves about what it would be like to go back to a country, because whatever your mother country is, because I think majority of countries that I can think of, chances are there are going to be a lot of things in the West that you won't have there. And that's completely fine. But I think I've seen some videos online where people are talking on YouTube and they're talking about going back. This was one girl specifically talking about going back to Jamaica, and it was all about, it's going to be great because I'm not accepted here and I don't like crowds and I don't like this. And then there was another video that she did that talked about actually I'm not really accepted and people don't see me as Jamaican. And for me, I completely understand that because I worked in international development. I went to like 5 or 6 different African countries. I love the continent of Africa. I honestly do. I would holiday there all the time. I tell people to go, but I was very aware that I was a Black British woman there. I understood that there were certain benefits and privileges that I had. I understand there was a certain way that I was treated, that the locals weren't treated. And as much as I adored seeing all Black people and it being the norm, it was just weird and wonderful and a blessing and all those good things. But I also understood very much that they would probably never fully accept me as one of them. And I don't know if I want to go from feeling that to a certain extent in the UK to then feeling that somewhere else. So I think it can be difficult.
Is?
Why do I feel like I wasn't accepted there?
Yeah.
I don't think it was anything bad or personal. I think every country has a nationalistic sort of pride in being there and being born of the country. And I think Jamaica is a very interesting country for that because you can be Jamaican Chinese, you can be Jamaican Indian, you can be Jamaican, like African descent, even though a lot of them don't really want to say that they're from African descent, but that's a conversation for another time. But for them is, if you're born in Jamaica, you are a Jamaican.
Yeah.
That's it. And a lot of other countries as well. If you're born in Barbados, you're Bayesian. They don't care about the colour of skin. It's not as much about race. It's much more about the wealth divide. So rich, poor. Whereas in the UK, it's a place where we don't have that. And we get that othering if you're of a different skin colour. So I don't think it's anything bad. I just think it's when you're born here, then you're one of us. And I think I feel it hurts more when I go to a country like Jamaica and you're not accepted because you're just like, but they're like, no, you're English girl. You're an English girl. They'll see you coming just by the way that you walk. They're like, we know that you don't come from here.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, I don't want to be othered by my own people. And I'm like, I have a life here. My family's here. I'm cool.
If bit of a weird question. If you had to choose between accepting the othered, would you prefer to be othered here in the UK or othered at your country, like where your grandparents came from or your mum came from?
Like, so it's kind of like what my personal view is, that it kind of comes back to what I was saying before about kind of, there's no such thing as level playing field. So it depends like what is driving you. If it's like comfortability and a sense of belonging, I think being othered here when you've been socialized into the world here and everyone you know is here and the culture you know is here, even if it's not always responsive to you in the way that you want it to be. The fact is, like, if you're born here, like, you do connect to British culture in some way. It has, like,
Yes.
it resonates with you. That doesn't mean to say it has to be the only culture, but it is the one thing that really, like, you do belong to, in inverted commas. Me going to Sri Lanka, for example, I love the culture, I love the food, I think it's amazing for opportunity. And in terms of like being othered there, I mean, I'm mixed race, I'm gonna be othered wherever I go. But say I moved there. The fact is, like, when we talk about this level playing field, I will be an advantage in a sense, and we're talking about work opportunities. But actually, for kind of my family, for example, a lot of them have emigrated anyway. But the ones who are there, it's like a neo-colonial thing, isn't it? Because I'm coming in as the Western person,
This is it.
coming in, using the opportunities, exploiting my advantage to kind of disadvantage them in a sense because I'm taking their jobs. It's like, it's basically gentrification on an international global scale, right? It's like countries rather than neighborhoods. And like in any kind of process of gentrification, you get like, there's an uplift, but the uplift happens kind of within the group that moves in and they kind of benefit themselves, but the beneficiaries are never the actual locals. And so that's the payoff. So in a sense, I wouldn't move to be othered there because I don't think it's unethical. I think it happens all the time. And I think there's no such thing as a purely ethical decision, but I don't know why I would go there when actually the culture I connect to is here.
This is something I wanted to talk about. That I'm sorry, guys, I just have to say this, but it touches on what you talked about, Nushy, in terms of this kind of incentivification that there is for people to come back to go back to reverse migrate. And I feel so uncomfortable about it because I know that, and I'm using this as an example, I have no ill feelings towards my Ghanaian brothers and sisters, but the year of return was a huge thing in Ghana and it's continuing every year now. So I think it's December. They have the year of return. Well, they had the year of return, but there's this thing to go back to Ghana in like the end of the year. And they brought in like 925 million when they did it, I think in 2019, 2016, I can't remember what year. And Their thing was come back for the culture, come back to your roots, blah, blah, blah. But it was a tourism incentive. They wanted to have people back because they're going to come back and spend money. And they did spend a lot of money, and they want to increase on that money that's being spent. But my thing is, when you want to say to people to come back, that's also a decision that they're making because they want to make money. It's not because they want you to necessarily just come and be part of the country. When they want to attract people to come back, they want people who are highly skilled, people who are in business, people who are going to upscale their country. They don't want people to come back and to be on welfare in their country, or to, to be on the lower social economic scale. Because the point is, when they're attracting people to come, when they're incentivizing people to come, it's people who they want to bring business. And that negatively affects the people who might already be struggling in the countries, because a lot of developing countries, even though there is massive wealth, there is also a lot of times bad infrastructure, poor access to education. Some countries I've been to in Africa, they don't even have clean running water. And they're like, when politicians want to get at election time, they want to get back into their post. So like, they come to the poor areas and they talk about, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. They get elected, they do nothing. And when you're spending so much money to attract people in who are already on a certain scale, and then you're going to make it easier for them to live there because you think they're going to bring business and wealth, what happens to the people there who are already disadvantaged? They're further pushed out. I don't think that they're given those same opportunities. So I think it's difficult, but the incentivification, I feel very, very dodgy about that.
I hear what you're saying, but I just feel like having people going back who have a skill that could contribute to the countries, I don't see what's wrong with that, because at the end of the day, when you look at things like, I don't know, comic relief, when they generate all of that money, where does it even go?
Not all of it goes to the
Where does
countries.
it go? Exactly.
It doesn't.
They're saying that they're trying to benefit these countries by helping them out with charity. Where does that money go? If they're doing tourism, let's take what you just said about for Ghana. If they're doing it for tourists, the money's going into that country. Yes, there's a lot of corruption and you don't actually know where the government and politicians are putting that money. But at least that money is directly in the country. And there isn't a third party from Western society trying to take hold of that money. I'm more uncomfortable with that than I am them doing it internally. Does that make sense? And even though they might be given a better life, their skills will be used amongst the community. So if they had teachers, if they had doctors, what they're bringing, even though they'll be helping certain types of people, just having that education there, they could then stem on and do something that could educate a whole bunch of people. So let's say they wanted, let's say I was a teacher and I wanted to go back to Sierra Leone and I wanted to teach in a school. Hopefully, I could then teach someone else something that's brought from this country, maybe our syllabus, and they'd learn something. So now I'm not only teaching in a specific school, but I've taught someone else. Maybe they could teach someone else. Maybe we could think about teacher training. We could just open up their minds and bring something different to the table. So I don't think it's always just about where is the money going? How are these skills going to be useful to teach people that can then be used into their communities? Does that make sense?
No, that doesn't make sense. And I think it's a really interesting point you bring up. And I think it's what people would say. And I don't wrong anybody for wanting to go back. For me, it's your choice. Like, do what makes you happy. And I think that's a very valid question that people would ask. Okay, so Sophie, would you rather I build up this country that hasn't done anything really for me, to a certain extent, because there are certain things that the country has done in terms of access to education and, welfare rights, whatever. But would I rather put money into building up the UK more? Or would I rather put into a country where my people and my ancestors came from, and I know that money is actually going to build up that country? And I think that is a very valid argument. So I get it either way, but I just feel as long as it's happening on a scale that everybody is benefiting, and that's not to do with any country that our families come from. Every country in the world, wealth is captured by the top percent. Like, that's just a given. The rich get rich. We're in a pandemic and the rich got richer. It just boggles the mind. You can't believe that sort of thing is happening. So it's going to happen wherever. So if you want to do it in your home country, it's a very valid choice.
Do you think that it would be something that everybody could do, or could you see certain people struggling?
As in going...
Yes, to reverse migrate.
I think you just have to have a clear idea of why you're doing it, there's this whole fantasy almost of going back to your country and having this spiritual awakening and setting up your business and making loads of money. there's this, like, it's just a fancy that's being peddled by people. And I think often it's just to kind of like mask their actual, issues they're having living in the UK, for example, rather than dealing with them. They're like, okay, like, this is what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? But actually, what is it rooted in? Because most people who reverse migrate end up coming back, or a lot of percentage of people do, not most. And when you actually have the realities of going to those countries, like we're saying, like the actual lifestyle is very different to here. Like in Ghana, when they do year of return, there's 23% of their population live below the poverty line, right? And that's been exacerbated and aggravated since people have started reverse migrating. Like the underlying like structural problems have got worse, the poverty's got worse, standards of living have got worse. And the government is encouraging this continued influx of money. But actually, in an ideal world, you'd be like, okay, these skills are being passed on, and, like the teachers going there, and like it creates a whole generation of teachers, and like the land is suddenly like educated everywhere and everyone's literate. But that is not the reality of why people are going back. And that's just not the reality of what is taking place. People are going back to exploit opportunities that people in the country don't have the money to do, and build their own empires in a world where they can't do it in the UK, for example, because they already exist and it's so crowded, and it's already so bureaucratic, and they're taking advantage of limited regulations in these countries. So, I
agree. I think as a whole, there seems to be a negative stereotype when you think about reverse migrating, because I know for me, in my culture, if you was ever threatened to go back home, it was a punishment. So if you weren't doing well in this country, you weren't listening to your parents, you weren't succeeding, you weren't following the plan that was put for you, you would be threatened with, okay, well, I'm going to put you on the first flight back to Africa, you're going home. And more recently, I've heard about for criminals, if they get sent to prison and they're not born here, they would do their time and then they get sent back to their country again. So just this whole idea of reverse migration already has a negative connotation stuck to it. So it doesn't surprise me that if people were reverse migrating, it's not necessarily to help the community or help the country. It's more so, what can I take from this experience? Because I already have this idea going back that it's not going to be positive. So I need to kind of fend for myself.
But you know what? That's what I really love about the people who are deciding to reverse migrate now, that they're actually changing that narrative of it's the punishment place. Because it not only was it something that a lot of parents, ethnic minority parents, I'm assuming, threaten their children with, it was also a running joke. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you better behave, otherwise, mommy's going to send you like that. And I love that this generation that I think that we're a part of are like, actually, why can't I go back? Why shouldn't I go back? Why shouldn't I put my money there? And I really love that we're starting to see the good in our countries that have always had this good, but we have been constantly told that they're not. So I really love that about it. But people have to be making an informed decision, making sure. And I was reading this article and I'm like, man, this girl has got it. She was saying, make sure that you just don't pack a bag and leave. Like, stage it out. Go and see what it's like. See what, stay for a short period of time, then stay for a longer period of time. Make sure you have money, because people are going to see you as a foreigner and want to charge you more. So make sure that you're aware of that. Make sure, for me, that you have connections, that you have something that you're going out there for. Because I saw someone who went out again, went back to Jamaica, somebody else, and they were saying, I went because I love the music and I wanted to go to the beach and I love the food. And my thing is like, is there a job coming here somewhere? Because what are you going to do for work? Like the people I know who now work in, I have a friend, he works in Nigeria. He's going out there to do business. He absolutely loves it. And for him, he's like, I went out there with a business. I started up making links and he is now working towards that goal. And for me, that's where I want to be at. Not just because I like it during holiday season, because anywhere's nice on holiday. When you live there, it's a different reality.
I think one thing that you touched on is the article that you read about the lady saying that you should have a step-by-step plan. To me, it's crazy that some people would have never gone back to the birthplace of their parents or their grandparents. And I'm like, wow. And sometimes it's the people who pretend to be the most woke and into their culture. And I'm like, but you haven't even stepped foot in your land before. Like, that's very baffling to me. So to go from that big jump to then be like, oh, like I might reverse migrate. Because I know quite a few men who are talking about taking business ventures in Africa. And I'm thinking, that's going to be very interesting when you've actually never been to this country before, Like, I'm not sure how successful that's going to go. And I think before you go there and have all these grand ideas of what you want to take, how about what you're going to give? Maybe go back and give some time. Do you know what I mean? Because I think there's a duality in it where as much as you want to line your pockets, as much as you want to get a spiritual awakening and be close to the culture, there's something that you have to be willing to give. If you have that mentality that you're just going to take, I don't think that's a good sign. And I don't think that anything successful is going to come from that.
I think accept as well that it's going to be different.
Absolutely.
And when I used to work in international development for a charity, I would also take over groups of volunteers as well. And I would hammer it into their heads. It's not going to be the same. And I don't want to hear no crap about it. I don't want to hear no complaining. It's just different. In different parts of the world, things are different. And it's easier to ridicule or make fun of or pick apart a country that hasn't got all the things that we have in the West. Because I'm like, if I went to like Norway, there are things that I didn't like there. When I went to Iceland, the food was pretty mediocre across the board. But I was like, yeah, I'm in Iceland. Do you know what I mean? What am I expecting?
Yeah.
But then we had people who will go to like an African country and it's like, oh, but I'm just like, let's not come with that energy, because we don't even realize how much we've internalized what people have said about these countries, that we feel like it's so much more unacceptable when we go there. I went to Australia, there wasn't, and I went there and I had some friends there and they were like, can you bring some relaxer? Can you bring some gel? They're like, you cannot get it out here. For me, already, I'm like, I'm not moving to Australia because I can't be having that with my hair. But everywhere you go, there's going to be a change, and people need to be aware of those little things, those little creature comforts that you might not get, and make it different and not see it as a negative. It's just how the country is.
Yeah. So if you were to reverse migrate, what is something that you would miss from the UK?
Transport. I know this is like the driest thing, but it's the truth. You know what I mean?
True.
It's so hard to get around in so many kind of like developing countries, like Sri Lanka. Very hard, but kind of okay because it's a tiny island. Like getting around in like India, Costa Rica, Mozambique, like different places I've been, it's taken days. But there's no formal like transport infrastructure. There's so many countries, Lebanon, where like the sort of instruction is stand on the side of the road, flag down a white van, and get inside. Like, can you imagine doing that in London? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, obviously, from time to time I do flag down white vans again, joking, but. Gotta make that money. That was a joke. but like transport 100%, because it's just, you don't realize like adding days and days to your journeys. It just changes everything. Yeah.
I guess not even just the comfort of the transport, it's the health and safety, because I've been in some cars and I thought my life's gonna end here. Like I don't think I'm gonna tonight. I think I'm gonna make it out of this alive. It's bloody scary. What would you miss?
Like, so I went to Nepal. Like, I really, really like Nepal as a country. Over there, cows are sacred, and there were just cows sitting on the road, and they'll drive around the cow because the cow is a sacred animal. So we're driving around. There wasn't really. We had to insist on seatbelts, but that's not the norm. So I understand the traffic. I think for me, Nepal also showed me about healthcare, and I think that's something that I am not the person who's going to complain about the NHS ever. They're doing the best that they can. Boris is trying to F it up. I'm just going to put that out there. Anyways, let me move on. Healthcare is a big thing. When I went to Nepal, this girl got extremely sick and they wouldn't even treat her until we had paid for the medication. And we just knew that the hospital that we went to was just the best one in the area, and it was still one of the scariest places I have ever been. This girl, she took some penicillin for the first time, didn't know that she was allergic to it because she never had it, had an allergic reaction, her face swelled up, her breathing got irregular, and I thought she was going to die on my work trip, and I didn't know I followed the protocol, but you can't control someone's life, whether what happens, and they're like, we're going to get an ambulance. I'm like, great. It was a van with a bed in the back. There was no paramedics. The ambulance was like, it's basically someone who's going to drive you to the hospital. That was an ambulance. And she's in the back and I'm holding her hand, telling her it's going to be okay. You're going to stay alive. You're going to be okay. And I'm just talking to her, and in my head, I'm like, she's going to die. I was scared to death. And literally they did all they could. But I knew that if we were in the UK, she would probably be fine. Allergic reaction wouldn't probably be a life killer if there was a hospital close enough. And this hospital was like a 30-minute drive away. For an allergic reaction, like people die of like a peanut thing after a couple of minutes, or people can die of like an asthma attack within a couple of seconds. So for me, I think healthcare is something that I'd be very, very mindful of, especially as a woman, and labor and all of that stuff, where the numbers really decrease the further you get away from the West.
What would you miss?
Probably a merge of what Sophie said and one of my own. I feel that healthcare is ridiculous. People die out there for the simplest things, like just being literate, being educated on some certain situations. Like it is life-threatening. I would say, as much as we grumble about the police here and inequality, you ain't seen nothing until you have seen the corruption that there is in Sierra Leone when it comes to paying police. You could kill someone
I've seen
and you
it.
can pay him and you can get away with it. Like, that is so scary to me. And I don't think that you'd actually take into consideration, how does this affect your life day to day? Like, if the people who you're supposed to trust in making sure that people are living out a good life, if you're easily swayed by money, and everyone is easily swayed by money, anything you want to get done, it can get done as long as you have the money to do so. Like, that is just so corrupt. But thinking about it in terms of the police, that would just send me into overdrive. And I don't think it's something that you would think about until you're in that situation. And then you realise, if I don't have money to coerce who I need, whether I'm doing the right thing or the wrong thing, nothing is going to get done because I don't have any money. So that kind of like play of power, that would mess with my head. But something that's a little bit less deep, I'd say that I would miss takeaways. Like, you know, just being able to...
what? I didn't even think about it, but girl, you're right.
Do you know
Oh
what I
my
mean? Like
days,
Uber Eats and stuff, Deliveroo.
yes.
Just being able to say, today I feel like I want to have...
Variety. Yo, that is it.
Right? Because I'm gonna come from my mum here a little bit. When I was in Sierra Leone, she was like, the food is amazing. And the food is amazing. I won't lie. I ordered Chinese. Why did the Chinese fried rice taste like African stew? I was vexed. And she probably bigged it up to me like, yeah, it's going to be just the same. It wasn't just the same. It was not just the same. And I was so annoyed. And my sister came with me. My sister's half Caribbean. And she got macaroni and cheese, right? And she was like, this is the spiciest macaroni and cheese I've ever ate in my life. She's like, it's not macaroni and cheese. I like it, but it's not macaroni and cheese. And I was like, oh man, it's not every day I'm going to want to eat this. I want to change it up a bit. So
do you know what? Creature comforts are a big thing. And I love takeaway and I love trying different types of food. So I am fully with that because, again, I think it was Ghana. And when I took some people over there, they were like, after day 2, I went, can we have something else apart from rice? I'm like, you're going to have rice every day and you're going to love it. That's what you're going to, because I'm like, we talked about this.
Yeah.
This is not the UK. And it really, one girl is like, she was hard. She was like a young mixed race girl, half black, half white. But she was very much into, I eat McDonald's all the time. That's like my favorite food. And she pretty much didn't really eat anything the entire time we were out there because she just couldn't get her head around not having a certain type of food, which for me was ridiculous because I'm like, this is McDonald's and home cooked like Ghanaian food. I don't even understand. But that sort of thing, when people decide to go back and you're like, oh, I'm vegan and I'm gluten free, and I'm just like, we need to temper expectations, people. Like, no one is going to be bringing you out your soya free nut loaf, gluten free bread in the morning. It's not going to happen. Like, and chances are your allergies might not be as strong over there because there's not so much processing going on with food. But again, it's another one of those things about making sure that you have realistic expectations when you're going out, because you might not be able to keep up the same sort of lifestyle.
Place I always think never lives up to expectations is America.
Yes.
I always think of it as a developed country.
I mean,
and I feel like you go over there and it's just, it's so horrifying, right?
Some parts.
It's like going back in time.
Yes.
And I think the food is awful. Why is everything so sweet?
Do you think the food's awful?
I think everything tastes like... I went to Atlanta.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I went to Atlanta for this conference with a friend, and someone told us about the best the best, what food do they call it? Well, black food, let's call it.
Soul food.
The best soul food in Atlanta. And me and my friend walked over a flyover. We were just walking. We literally put it into our phone and we're walking, trying to find a place. Got to it and we were tired. We had walked at least 45 minutes, an hour to find this place. When we got there, we ordered, and like they said as well, macaroni cheese. I'm like American macaroni cheese hasn't got a hard top. It's like saucy. It's it's kind of like the one you get in the tin, which is not right. Yeah. It's not sanctified. It's not real. It's not macaroni cheese. Not
but I feel like that's the white American macaroni.
I mean,
cheese.
I don't want to say it, but yes. and they had that, and then I tried the food, and I'm like, why does everything taste like sugar? I was so surprised. I'm like, this is soul food. I was like, and this is the best that you're saying Atlanta has to offer. So me and my friend just ate quickly. We're like, let's just go. Let's catch a cab back. Got in the cab and the guy was just like, yeah, it's lucky you called me now. I don't come here after dark. I went, excuse me? He went, oh, this is a really dangerous area. He's like, yeah, we don't come here after in a couple hours time. And in my head, I was just like, My friend, we're walking across a flyover. Mercy, I made it out alive, guys. That's all I can say.
To him, you get the best food in the most janked up places.
It's always the case.
That's
it's
what I've
always
heard.
the case. Like when you see the floor, like sometimes the best reviewed places, you're like, am I in there? When you see the TripAdvisor, you're like, okay, I guess so, but yeah, don't be fooled by pretty restaurants.
I'll tell you what, my dad is American and he said to me that he feels like English people throw sugar in their food. So I guess it's like who you
Down to
ask. Both of
opinion.
you are looking at me like, what are you
It's
talking
opinion,
about?
Yeah.
But it's been lovely speaking to you, ladies. So thank you for watching and listening to Ethnically Speaking. Subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And if you're watching us on YouTube, leave a comment and like this video. See you soon.